All right, let's jump right in. We're talking about a man who managed to be both a king and a saint. That's Louis IX of France, the only French monarch ever to be canonized by the Catholic Church. He was a medieval ruler who built a legacy so powerful, it actually went beyond royalty itself. But that raises a really fascinating question, doesn't it? I mean, in an age of cutthroat politics and pretty brutal warfare, how on earth does a king, a guy with immense worldly power, end up on the official list of saints? Well, the journey is way more complex and surprising than you might think. As we're going to see in this explainer, the answer isn't just one single heroic act. Nope. It's really a combination of three distinct but totally interconnected roles he played throughout his life. And it's these three pillars that built the foundation for his sainthood. So, the first pillar was his role as a just king. And this wasn't some empty title people gave him. It was a reputation he earned through direct personal action. This quote, man, it just paints such a powerful picture. And it's probably the most famous story about King Louis. You gotta forget stuffy courtrooms or endless bureaucracy. He would literally go sit under an oak tree and let anyone, whether you were rich or poor, plead their case directly to him. For that time period, this was absolutely revolutionary. And this wasn't just for show, you know? He turned it into a system. He sent out royal envoys, kind of like inspectors, to keep an eye on the local lords and make sure they weren't abusing their power. He established a Supreme Court for final appeals. Piece by piece, he was actually building the foundations of the French legal system, and it was all centered on this one big idea. Justice should be fair and accessible to everybody. Now, his commitment to justice was matched only by the second pillar of his legacy, his incredibly deep personal faith. And this was not a quiet, private thing. He expressed it in a very public and truly magnificent way. If you've ever been lucky enough to go to Paris, you might have seen the result of his devotion, the Sainte-Chapelle. It's considered an absolute masterpiece of Gothic architecture, a building that honestly seems to be made more out of stained glass than stone. But why build something so extraordinary? Well, the answer is just astonishingly specific. He built this breathtaking chapel not as, say, a cathedral for the public, but as a giant, ornate treasure chest. It was designed to hold some of the most sacred objects in all of Christianity. His main motivation was the primary relic he housed there, the actual crown of thorns. For a king with his level of faith, having this was a massive spiritual responsibility. So he acquired it, and then he built one of the world's most beautiful buildings simply to give it a worthy home. That one act pretty much sealed his reputation for piety all across Europe. Okay, so this brings us to the third and honestly, the most dramatic pillar of his life, his identity as a crusader, a holy warrior for the faith. And this is where his story really turns into a high-stakes adventure. You see, Louis led not one, but two major crusades. His first one, though, ended in total disaster. He was defeated and captured in Egypt, which was a pretty humiliating blow for a king. He was eventually ransomed, but his story doesn't stop there. In fact, what he did next is what really defines him. After being freed, most kings would have sailed straight back home to France. But not Louis. He made a completely different choice, one that showed his profound sense of duty. Instead of going home, he spent 4 more years in the Holy Land. 4 years! I mean, just think about that. He stayed not as a conqueror, but as a protector and a builder, using his own money and leadership to help the struggling Crusader states. And this just shows you the two sides of his crusading identity. Yes, he was a warrior who led armies into battle, but here he was a fortifier. He poured a ton of resources into rebuilding the Walls of Acre, which was the capital of the Kingdom of Jerusalem at the time, literally strengthening the Christian foothold in the region. But his mission there went way beyond just warfare and construction. During those 4 years, Louis showed another side of his faith, a real commitment to care and to charity. And this really shows his sense of service in action. In Jerusalem, he founded a hospital, and not just for Christian pilgrims, but for the local population too. To Louis, this was just a fundamental act of faith. Caring for the sick was every bit as important as fighting a holy war or building a grand chapel. So let's bring it all together. How did these 3 pillars, the just king, the pious patron, and the charitable crusader all lead to him becoming a saint. Well, it basically created the perfect narrative. He ruled with a legendary sense of justice, he showed his piety with undeniable grandeur, and then he died of disease while on his second crusade in Tunis. In the eyes of the church, that was a martyr's death. The combination was just undeniable, and sure enough, he was declared a saint less than 30 years after he died. Ultimately, the legacy of St. Louis really boils down to this one single powerful idea. He saw his immense power not as a privilege, but as a profound duty to serve his people through justice, to serve God through piety, and to serve the vulnerable through charity. And that leaves us with a final thought. While Louis IX's world was incredibly different from ours, his ideal, that power is a responsibility to serve, that feels timeless. It kind of forces us to ask, what does that kind of leadership look like today? And what can we still learn from the king who became a saint?